Today we're going to talk about my philosophy applied to physical fitness and why I believe that you should be training full body every day.
Makes sense.
Now, I have made my best results, especially getting lean and chiseled, on lifting 2 days a week. I have insane recovery and my appetite is lower.
Okay.
The green leafies. Now these are the ultimate when it comes to building up your immune system. Spinach, kale, constantly in our household. We love them. You gotta get them in.
Okay.
Oxalates are well known to cause kidney stones, joint pain, gut issues. Spinach is so high in oxalates, guys. Do not eat spinach salads. Get this out of your diet. Not a health food. Bad for you. Take health foods.
And semen retention is basically, a lot of fighters do it before a fight, maybe 2 months before a fight. They don't ejaculate, they don't come. And by keeping that semen in yourself, bro, it changes everything for you, man.
Oh my lord, I am horny.
Let's relax. Let's relax.
All right, let's find some motivation.
All this no fat bullshit, you're just thinking with the wrong head, G. Just understand, man, that you're just dumb when you're feeling that way. Like, go beat your meat, bro. Get out your system and get your ass back to work.
All right, this.
We live in an age with an abundance of misinformation. For every opinion or fact you find online, you can just as easily find its contradiction. All it takes is switching up a few words in your Google search. With that has come an increasingly more apparent level of mistrust, not just amongst sources on the internet, but also between people in real life. If we don't learn how to fight against this, we're only going to see this trend of mistrust continue to go upward. But there are ways to remain open-minded and get closer to the truth. It won't be easy, and it might even piss you off a little bit, but it will clear up a lot of the confusion, anger, and frustration you currently feel towards modern society and the people in it. In 2017, Peter Schulman, an associate history professor at Case Western Reserve University in Ohio, was lecturing on the reemergence of the Ku Klux Klan in the 1920s. While in the middle of his lecture, one of his students asked a question. Was President Warren, the United States president at that time, a member of the KKK? Schulman was confused. Had that really been an accusation made when Warren had been in favor of anti-lynching legislation? Although he did not know for sure, he swiftly denied the claim. But shortly after the discussion was halted, another student pulled out their phone and revealed that, yes, Harding had in fact been a Klan member, along with 4 other US presidents. And the way they found out was due to the first box that showed up on Google when searching for the original question. This is what is known as Google's featured snippets, and it's one of the biggest sources for confirmation bias and poorly thought out research on the internet. Whether you type in a word, an event, or the name of a person, you're more than likely to get this visually distinct box at the top of the page that is Google's attempt at providing a one true answer. So how often is this really true? Well, if we go back to our example with the professor and his students at Case Western, we find that the result Google was quoting came from an unreliable article in Trent Online, which calls itself the leading internet newspaper in Nigeria. The sources they cited came from 2 different places. The first, a pseudo-historian named David Barton, and the second, the former KKK website. It was later found that this claim that Harding was part of the KKK was a lie concocted by the KKK themselves, and specifically just one dude who was a part of the KKK that said that on his deathbed, and that after biographers investigated Harding, they found no actual evidence that he was a member. I wanted to do a deeper dive into how Google could have gotten something so controversial so incredibly wrong, so I decided to click on the About Featured Snippets text located right beneath the box. On their website under How Featured Snippets Are Chosen, Google states, Google's automated systems determine whether a page would make a good featured snippet to highlight for a specific search request, meaning that the main decision maker for people's interpretation of facts for a given subject, at least on Google, is usually a robot. Now, of course, you could just keep scrolling down the page and click on maybe the 4th or 5th option and hope to find some more accurate information there, but let's be honest, most people don't do that, and we have the data to support this. Besides, much of what Google puts on the first page actually has more to do with SEO, or search engine optimization, which, as the name suggests, is more concerned with relevancy, keywords, reader retention, and how many people share that content, rather than the accuracy of the content itself. No longer do you need to be an expert in a given field in order to be considered the person who has the most sound answers. You just need to be the expert of the algorithm. And what is the algorithm really, if not what most people are inclined to click on? Mr. Beast, a name I'm sure 99% of you are familiar with, has this really great quote where he says, "Anytime you say the word algorithm, just replace it with audience." The algorithm didn't like that video? No, the audience didn't like that video. If we apply the same logic to Google, it means that what matters most to getting ranked the highest in the Google search and having the most people see your page is whatever garners the most clicks and attention, not what is most true. Now, it may be the case that the thing at the top of the search results is actually what is most true about a given subject or topic, but that usually happens out of coincidence. But let's move over from the largest search engine in the world to the largest social media platforms in the world, because this is really where misinformation starts to spread like wildfire. You might have noticed that when you scroll on a social media platform for long enough, they'll start to suggest advertisements based on your specific interests, almost as if they're in your head. But what a lot of people don't know about this seemingly harmless process is that social media platforms themselves can't be trusted because of how they're using your personal data. Data brokers are these large corporations that aggregate your data from your social media account and other public records, cleanse it, analyze it, and then license it and sell it to other data brokers or other organizations with an interest in your data. And the problem with this is that with your data exposed online, it's so much easier for you to become a victim of identity theft, or it can even ruin future job opportunities. People like to joke about having a digital footprint from posting cringe stuff online, but the real digital footprint is your social security number, your phone number, your name, and address that gets taken from these companies. I've used services to remove my data from all the biggest data brokers in the past, and the one I recommend the most is today's sponsor, Delete Me. Basically, all you do is put in your info on their site, which they of course keep confidential, and Delete Me will start scouring the internet for all your personal information, tell you exactly where they found it, and then remove it from these corporations, so you never have to worry about Dave from Wyoming opening up a credit line and ordering thousands of dollars worth of anime pillows under your name. Unless that was actually you. If you're interested in getting your personal data and information removed so you can prevent yourself from all of this stuff, you can go to the first link in my description, which is joindeleteme.com/Cole20, and if you use the code Cole20 at checkout, you'll get a 20% discount on any consumer plan. So protect yourself from the wrath of the Zuck and click that first link in the description. Okay, I want you to do a little exercise with me. I want you to think of the last time you felt like you could really trust what a social media personality was saying. Maybe they were talking about a current trending topic, or trying to expose the government, or they tried to tell you why doing this one thing will improve your chances with girls by 350%. Do you have the image of them in your brain? Okay, here's my next question. Why did you decide to believe this person? Was it because they provided you trustworthy information in the past and that ended up being true, so now you trust them more? Or is it because they have real credentials and a background in what they're talking about? While these may be some of the reasons why you trust what your favorite content creators say, I think there's a deeper answer that you're not going to want to hear. Social media has allowed just about anyone with a camera, or even just a microphone, to give their opinions or what they consider to be as facts on any given topic and have that piece of content potentially reach millions across the world. The problem is we like to think that we have logical reasoning behind why we trust some people over others, but the reality is that how you judge a person's trustworthiness is based on very emotional, biased factors. For instance, let's say you're trying to learn how to build muscle and you look up how to start lifting weights as a beginner on YouTube. The first couple search results offer a guy who's not too good looking, has minimal muscle himself, and his thumbnail isn't really colorful or clickable. But when you scroll down to the third option, you see a massive dude who is highly attractive both in the body and in the face, and you end up clicking on that one and trusting him more. This is a prime example of the halo effect, a cognitive bias which states that a single trait or characteristic of a person will positively or negatively influence our feelings or opinions in another area related to that person. In this example, it very well could have been the case that the guy who wasn't too good looking, didn't have a lot of muscle, and had a lousy thumbnail had exponentially better fitness advice than the roided out dude with the optimized thumbnail. But our brain used its bias towards someone who looks like they know what they're talking about to assume that this person must have better fitness advice than everyone else. This halo effect isn't new. Since human beings have existed and almost all mammals for that matter, we tend to put more trust and faith in someone who is more attractive or looks like they know what they're talking about. As another example, think about how we tend to find a guy with glasses, a sweater vest, and a mountain of books next to him as more trustworthy on topics related to philosophy and literature. But what is new about this phenomenon is just how much social media amplifies our biases and promotes the things that appeal to our emotions, which then leads to a lot more misinformation. If you can simply just play the part of someone who looks like they could be trusted in a given area, whether that's trying to make yourself look attractive, look more professional, or transform your appearance in a way that we associate trustworthiness to in a given field, then you can become a leading source of information on the internet. And if you add in a superior ability to articulate your thoughts and talk with strong conviction and body language, then you can become even more believable. Kind of like, what is going on right here? Oh, yeah. Look, most people don't want to use their brain really hard. They just want to convince themselves that what this person is saying is true. This parody of just how outrageous some of the misinformation that's spread online and how it's spread online is a funny example of this, though is obviously exaggerated.
What did ant-eaters eat before ants existed? And what were they called if they didn't eat ants? Isn't that concerning?
Simply just by speaking like you know what you're talking about, you can convince a lot of impressionable young people who aren't aware of how their biases are controlling their perception of truth that you're right. Then there's the emotional triggering aspect of it as well. There are tons of people online, but Twitter seems to be the biggest place for this, who will willingly spout and post misinformation simply because they know it will gain a lot of attention. They will misreport a current event or give an opinion that they might not even believe themselves, but it's ridiculous enough to get people engaging with the post, so it ends up going viral. Luckily, Twitter now has their community notes feature, which has been pretty useful in exposing how many tweets are just flat out lies, but even that isn't very effective sometimes. And the worst part about all of this is that you can convince yourself that whatever you're being presented with on social media the most must be the most true information. Internet bubbles are a concept I talked about in my Rise of NPCs video, but I didn't talk much about how it leads to a groupthink problem. It is true that most of the time, any social media platform is going to continue recommending you content that you are engaging with the most. So if you start getting into watching, say, self-improvement content, it's going to start recommending you videos that the majority of other people who are into self-improvement are watching. At least from my experience here on YouTube and what I can see my audience is watching in my analytics tab, self-improvement is consumed more by people who lean closer to the right side of the political spectrum and enjoy hearing red-pill takes about women and the world. This subtly and deviously pushes you into a certain ideology and set of beliefs that you may have never even had before, but since most people who are into the same stuff as you are watching and agreeing with the content, then you subconsciously start to say to yourself, this is the way I should be thinking. This is how social media has exacerbated tribalism, or an us versus them mentality throughout society. When you identify with a certain group online, most people tend to prioritize the interests of the group over the interests of others, and even go so far as to do things that would be harmful to those outside of the group. And when that happens, our shared humanity collapses or becomes irrelevant, and anything that contradicts what is true and right within your group immediately gets labeled as untrustworthy. In other words, anything that challenges your identity or the identity of the group cannot be trusted. I've experienced firsthand just how much a tribalist mentality can make a more nuanced person be perceived as untrustworthy. Because I'm in this self-improvement space, and like I talked about before, most people in here are more right-leaning on the political spectrum, they assume that I must be conservative or Republican and have exclusively right-leaning political beliefs. So when I start to talk about things in a more left-leaning liberal manner, such as challenging traditional masculinity, or in other words, when I have a less polarizing mix of political and self-improvement beliefs, those in the online tribe of self-improvement whose views are exclusively polarizing start to trust me less and get very angry and upset with me. And it makes sense because I've challenged their confirmation bias towards what they consider to be true, and I've challenged the online tribe of self-improvement groupthink as a whole. Think of how you might be guilty of this as well. How many times have you completely written off a piece of content's advice or presentation simply because it didn't match with the online tribe you most closely resonate with? How many times have you felt a creator was untrustworthy because they started to be more nuanced with their takes and consider perspectives from both sides? This way of thinking and acting towards creators is just as problematic as believing any creator who acts and looks like they know what they're talking about. If we really want to get closer to working together and trusting each other as an entire species more, we must start to challenge the information that we're immediately presented with, as well as our biases towards things that we consider to be true. So here are some of the ways in which I have done so, to the best of my ability at least, and please do not click off the video here. This is where I'm actually going to give you actionable steps to do something to change these issues. The first rule of thumb I use for finding the most accurate and truthful information is to never trust a single source and never rely on purely anecdotes when you can. Whether you look up a question you have about a topic you're interested in on Google, search it on social media, or just get fed a piece of content through the algorithm and it piques your interest enough to engage with it, do more research and look for more sources on the given topic. If you're searching for the truth on Google, it's usually in your best interest to just ignore the featured snippet entirely. Probably go through like the entire first page of links and then come to a more sound conclusion about the truth you're trying to seek. I know it's extremely appealing to just watch a 60-second TikTok video on an issue that requires much more than 60 seconds to really grasp the situation or concept, but you need to actively remind yourself that there's probably much more to what you're being told here than you think. Before you decide to believe something as true that you've seen online or even in real life, put in the effort to see the complexities behind that truth prior to adopting it into your set of beliefs. The second rule I use is to check if I'm relying too heavily on biases when I start to agree with something. The most relevant biases for this video that I want to go over are confirmation bias, anchoring bias, and the availability heuristic. Confirmation bias is a tendency to only pay attention to information that confirms your current beliefs about issues and only follow people on social media who share your viewpoints. This is similar to what I was trying to describe when I was talking about internet bubbles and only believing what the tribe you are associated with believes. Anchoring bias is our tendency to be overly influenced by the first piece of information that we hear. For example, we tend to be overly influenced by our first impressions of people, which may not be an accurate representation of them at all, or we might get trapped into thinking that whatever first thing we learn about self-improvement, red pill, politics, or any subject is the most trustworthy and only way to think about these things. Social media has a great way of enhancing this anchoring bias problem as well, because once you click on that first video and get fed its claims, the algorithm's gonna start pumping similar videos, thereby having you become overly influenced by only that particular type of content. And the availability heuristic is the tendency to overestimate the probability of something happening based on how many examples readily come to mind. For example, you might believe that women are more untrustworthy than they actually are because you've recently been consuming tons of content related to female nature, and this content is only highlighting examples of how women have cheated and how many marriages have failed. So you can kind of see how all these biases blend and influence one another to create this misinformation cocktail in your brain. There's a ton of other biases that are negatively influencing your ability to think clearly, so if you want a whole list of cognitive biases, I've left a link in the description for you to do more research on those things. But to combat the biases we just went over, I use the third rule. Check to see what the other side is saying. I'll admit I used to frequently get caught in the bias of thinking that anything that goes against the belief that veganism is the healthiest human diet is wrong. And for a long time, I see this now, I wouldn't consume any content opposed to that belief, being plant-based myself. But I think the biggest turning point for me was when I started to see people who consume a plant-based diet themselves start to debunk some of the points made in the Netflix documentary, What the Health. It was clear that the documentary made some really bold claims, like saying that eating an egg a day is as bad for your life expectancy as smoking 5 cigarettes.
I'd never really thought about eggs much. I just thought of them as a standard part of a healthy diet. But then I found a study suggesting that eating just 1 egg a day can be as bad as smoking 5 cigarettes per day for life expectancy.
This was later proven to be outdated information, and the documentary also cherry-picked several other studies. So that's when I started to say to myself, okay, there's obviously a ton of health benefits to eating a primarily plant-based diet, but that doesn't automatically mean that someone who is eating animal products is less healthy. The truth about diet is definitely somewhere in the middle there and is massively more complex than all animal foods are bad for you. Now, watch as I get attacked in the comments by strict carnivores because I go against their tribe's beliefs, and get attacked by strict vegans because I go against their tribe's beliefs. But apart from diet, I try to do this with my other beliefs and opinions as well. A great website for getting the most unbiased news specifically is All Media. They give you resources for current news topics from the left, right, and center of the political spectrum, so you can protect yourself from biased media and misinformation. It's always important to consider that your beliefs or way of living may not be the most morally and logically sound or accurate, and you should put in an effort to get perspectives from both sides of a given topic. From that, you can gain a more balanced view and not get so emotionally swayed by something that challenges your assumptions, and ultimately, your identity. If polarizing black and white thinking continues to expand, we're only going to see more mistrust, misinformation, and a lack of cooperation expand with it. We all need to consider the possibility that we might not be seeing all sides to things, that we all use biases to keep our identities within our tribes safe, and that people who think completely different from us might actually have a point sometimes. It doesn't mean you're completely fluid with your beliefs or opinions, constantly changing them anytime you're presented with new information. But conversely, it also doesn't mean we immediately disregard any contrarian perspective. Objective truths do exist in this world, but they almost always exist somewhere between the black and the white. And in that gray is where our shared humanity lies. Thank you very much to my patrons on Patreon. This is where you can get exclusive content from me, or you can talk to me one-on-one over the phone on there. You can check the link in the description for that. And if you haven't seen my Rise of NPCs video yet, you should definitely watch it because it's a nice little prequel, sequel to this video. I don't know what I would call it. It's one of those things, but go watch it. And yeah, I'm heading out. Thanks for trusting me. And I try to be as authentic as possible on my channel. I love you guys, and peace.